watching Gearz, brought to you by LMC Truck. Restore, maintain, customize.
Hey, welcome to Gearz. You know, a few weeks ago, we rolled this old International truck out of a junkyard and showed you that it's possible to bring something back to life that's been left for dead, if you take your time and follow a few simple steps. Here's how it went. Steady as she goes. Keep going, we got it. That's some pretty nasty stuff there, man. Wow, there's hardly any sludge at all. It sounds awesome! We also had the privilege a few weeks ago of riding with the Blue Angels and showing you what makes that organization tick.
All right, Stacey, you ready to roll? I'm ready to roll. Ready, hit. That's awesome, man. These restraints were tight. We're coming up on 600, Mach 0.95. There's 630, and there's Mach 1, 700 miles per hour. Anytime we're in a dogfight with a dissimilar aircraft, we will try and force the fight into a slow-speed fight because our aircraft has dominance in the slow-speed arena. Wow, you ever get tired of this? Never.
Now, I know that there's some of you that are probably wondering if there's a connection between this old Navy truck and the Blue Angels. Well, yeah, there is. Because I'm about to start building this into a rig that not only represents the Blue Angels, but anybody that makes a living working with their hands. Now, the project is going to be called Heavy Metal, and I'm basically going to combine this truck with an F-18 Hornet, throw in some rock and roll and some attitude and some horsepower, and hopefully create a vehicle that no one's ever seen before, all out of a truck that was destined for the crusher. That is heavy metal. All right, the first order of business on a project like this is to decide your drivetrain. Now, I know you're thinking we're probably going to reuse this old International engine. I mean, it looks good, it runs good, right? Well, that's true, but it's only about 200 horsepower, which is not going to get it on a project like this. So, we'll retire this off to some other project. What's going in heavy metal is a completely different thing. Check it out. Now, what we have here is a 2001 GM Duramax Diesel engine and the matching Allison transmission. Now, these things were available in everything from the 2500 series pickups all the way up to the 5500 series medium-duty trucks. So these are pretty easy to find. Now, the problem that people have had in the past when trying to retrofit a diesel into their project is lack of aftermarket support. So that meant you had to find a wrecked vehicle, get the engine, pull the transmission, pull out the wiring harness, all the sensors, and then try to make it work, which was a major pain in the butt, and it was expensive. So a lot of people didn't do it. But times are changing, and this engine right here is proof of that. We got this core engine and transmission from the guys at Bully Dog, and then we shipped it off to Pacific Performance Engineering, or PPE for short, to get some performance upgrades. Now, first they added a secondary high PSI fuel pump to get more fuel in the engine. Then they added a bigger turbo to get more air in. And then, of course, they threw in some other tweaks and parts to make this big diesel run like it should. Plus, PPE specializes in complete standalone engine computers and wiring harnesses that allow you to drop a diesel into any kind of project, no more having to adapt an OEM harness. This is good. As you can see, PPE builds most of its components in-house, and they've been modifying and racing diesel engines for 23 years, so there's no question that their stuff works. So, just how powerful is this engine? Well, a stock Duramax is about 300 horsepower and about 550 foot-pounds of torque. This one, after being massaged by PPE, was put on their dyno, and it ran 600 horsepower and 1,300 foot-pounds of torque. Now that is an awesome engine. Of course, the transmission's been tweaked too by PPE with one of their torque converters and extra clutches and all kinds of stuff, so that won't blow into a zillion pieces when all that torque hits it. So as you can see, we have an incredible drivetrain here. It's going to be perfect in that truck. Hey, we're back, and we're digging into a project called heavy metal, which involves taking this old '69 International Cabover Truck and turning it into a big old hot rod. Now, that's the original engine that came in this thing, and it was big and heavy and underpowered. This is the Duramax Diesel that's going into it, and it's big and heavy, but has a lot of power, thanks to some performance upgrades by PPE. Now, the question becomes, how do you take a completely different drivetrain and put it into a vehicle that's completely different than something you may have ever worked on? Well, it's not that hard, and we are going to prove that to you. Okay, the first thing you need to do is get rid of everything that you're not going to need, like these old air lines and brake lines, wiring harnesses, brackets, anything that you're not going to reuse, get it out of there, because you definitely don't want them in the way.
Hit me.
All right, very funny. All right, open it up. All right, once you got everything cleaned up, you can start laying out how your drivetrain's gonna fit. Now, one thing that's gonna be a factor in that is, of course, your radiator, because it's gonna be right up here in front. And of course, our original radiator was old and nasty and not compatible with that Duramax. So we called the guys at R&D Fabrication, see if they could help us out. Check it out. R&D Fabrication specializes in top quality aluminum radiators for muscle cars and off-road vehicles and pretty much anything you're driving. Now, they engineer their stuff to bolt right in place of your stock radiator and keep your engine cool. But they also have cooling fans, they make fan shrouds, they have catch cans, they have overflows, pretty much anything that you're gonna need for a cooling system. Now, one thing that R&D does that other people don't is that they will custom make you a radiator. So we shipped them this 75-pound relic out of our truck there, and they built a replica out of aluminum. Now this thing here is going to slide right in place of that stalker, except it's got the inlets and outlets for the Duramax, it's got the light weight of aluminum, and it's got the cooling capacity to keep that diesel cool. If you need a custom radiator, R&D Fabrication's the guys to talk to. Now, on a typical engine swap project like this, you have a firewall and a core support and inner fenders that kind of dictate where the engine's gonna go, because you don't usually move that stuff. However, on a project like this, that's completely different, because you don't have a standard firewall or core support or inner fenders. So you need to spend a little bit of time deciding what can and cannot be moved. For example, the radiator and the cab are up here. That can't be moved, so you can't go any further forward than that. This brace here holds the cab, so the engine can't sit any higher than this, but it can't sit too low because you got an axle down there, and we're gonna lower this truck so that axle's gonna come up a little bit. So with all of this stuff in mind, it's time to start fitting the drivetrain. Hey, you're watching Gearz, and if you're wondering what's going on here, we are in the process of transplanting a hopped-up Duramax diesel engine into this old International truck. And if you're gonna do something like this, you definitely need a strong hoist, because everything about a project like this is big and heavy. Okay, we've got this engine mocked into place, and as you can see, this thing is fitting awesome. But like I've said before, this is the area where you need to take your time and think through every aspect of this engine swap, because you don't want to overlook something that's going to give you problems down the road. Here's what I'm talking about. In front, we've got plenty of room for electric fans or overflows or anything else we might want to mount up here. We're low enough in the frame to clear this upper cross member. The exhaust manifolds are tucking nicely into the frame rails for easy access. Both the fuel filter and the oil filter are clearing the frame enough so we've got easy serviceability, and the engine is sitting far enough back so that the oil pan will clear the axle when we lower the truck. So we're good all the way around. Okay, once you've got everything in place how you want it, now you get to build some mounts to keep it there. Now on a project like this where all we have is bare frame rails, we're completely starting from scratch on this one. So what we have to do is build something that will connect the factory motor mount to the frame. Using thick 1/4-inch steel, we built a bracket to match the odd contour of the diesel motor mount. With all the pieces cut, you're ready to weld them up. Now, on heavy steel like this, don't forget to grind a bevel into the metal at all the joints. This will allow the welds to penetrate deep down into the metal. Also, even though I threaded the holes in the plate, I also welded some nuts on the inside so you have plenty of threads for extra strength. With the motor part done, we'll turn our attention to the frame mounts, and we'll fabricate those from some scrap pieces of old truck frame. All right, this is how it all comes together. Notice this is the part we built that bolts to the engine. This is the part we built that bolts to the frame rails. Now notice that I've connected the two by welding in 1/4-inch square stock to build my corners. Now by doing it this way with the engine in place, it allows you to build a skeleton structure that takes into account all the strange twists and bends and angles of the way that engine sits between those frame rails. Now all you have to do is come in, weld in some 1/4-inch flat steel to fill all this in, and you're going to have incredibly strong motor mounts that are removable, and they're going to fit perfect. Once the motor mounts are ground down and painted, it's just a matter of bolting them in. Also, a few simple modifications to the transmission crossmember mounts will allow us to reuse that for our transmission mount. The most important thing about this project, though, is the fact that using these techniques will allow you to put any engine into anything you want. And that's what Gearz is all about.
Now, quick tip. Brought to you by E3 Spark Plugs. Born to burn.
You know, there's one situation that just about everybody is going to face if they work on cars and trucks long enough. And that is, eventually you're going to have to fill some holes in a frame or in a firewall or something. Now, the best way to do that, of course, is to weld up the holes. But there's another tool involved here. and it is called a copper spoon. Now basically, this is a piece of copper on a handle, and you use it as a backing to keep the weld from falling through the hole as you weld it up. Now, of course, the weld won't stick to the copper, so when you're done, you just pull it away. Unfortunately, these guys are expensive, and you can only get them at a specialized welding store. So what are you going to do? Well, fortunately, there is a cheap alternative. Just grab yourself a scrap piece of aluminum. This is a lowering block that you can pick up at just about any auto parts store for just a few bucks, and snap on a pair of vice grips. Now basically, you have just created the same tool because the aluminum block won't let the weld come through the hole, and just like the copper, the weld will not stick to the aluminum. And you have the option of moving the handle around to custom make whatever tool that you need. Now, if you want other tips on how to make your life easier in the shop, just check out the tips page on the website.
And now, Parts Bin.
You know, a few years ago, Holley came out with a great street carburetor called the Street Avenger. The problem is, when you make something this good, how do you make it better? Simple. You make it ultra. Check it out. These are the Ultra Street Avenger carburetors from Holley. Now, the first thing that grabs your eye with these is the trick billet anodized metering blocks and base plates that you can get in 3 different colors. But these aren't just about looks. These things will run too. You can get them in 670 CFM, 770 CFM, and then for drivability, they have vacuum secondaries and of course electric chokes. So you can put these on your street machine that you want to look good, and you can still drive that thing every day and it's going to perform for you. Now, say you want more power than this, well, you can step up to the Ultra double pumper with its mechanical secondaries and of course its electric choke. So now you've got the look of a show car and the power of a race car all wrapped up into one nice little package. So if you want ultra fast and ultra light and ultra cool, you don't have to look any further than Holley. One of the most important parts to any car are the brakes. And we spend a lot of money trying to find the biggest, baddest clampers that we possibly can. But all the fancy brakes in the world are not going to help you stop unless you can get the air out of the brake lines. Well, Phoenix Systems has got the perfect tool to help you do that. This is the Max Pro Phoenix Injector. Now, this thing is a die-cast aluminum, fully adjustable pump that allows you to do every kind of bleeding you can imagine. Pressure bleeding, vacuum bleeding, bench bleeding, even reverse bleeding. This thing will do it all. And you do it with one person using one hand. No more hunting down a neighbor to push on the brake pedal for you. Now, the kit also comes with all kinds of fittings and quick disconnects and hoses, so you literally can hook up to any system that you can imagine. When you're filling up your toolbox, there are some tools that you've got to have and some that you just like to have. If you are ever going to work with brakes, the Max Pro from Phoenix Systems is one tool you've got to have. Everybody knows that trucks are made to be used, and if you're not towing or hauling something in one of them, there's really not much point in having one. Now, the hauling part is pretty easy. You just throw stuff in the bed. But the towing part, well, that's a little more difficult, especially on something like this that's lifted. Fortunately, Inventive Hitches came out with a solution no matter what you're driving. Check it out. This is called the Brute XD hitch system. And as you can see, there are a lot of accessories available for this thing. But the heart of this system is in this hitch right here. Now, this slides into your receiver and gives you up to 11 inches of adjustability up or down, so it is perfect for a lifted vehicle. It's also extremely strong. This is how it goes together. The ball is attached with this unique pin system that's not only extremely strong and lockable, but it also allows you to switch to a different size ball or other accessory in just a few seconds. Now, say you need to hook up a trailer, but you're by yourself. Now, what are you gonna do? Well, they also have an option called the swivel lock, which allows you to move the ball forward, back, side to side, pretty much wherever it needs to go. So all you gotta do is get the trailer in the ballpark, and the hitch will do the rest. So, if towing a trailer is something that you do a lot, well, you owe it to yourself to check out the Brute Hitch system at InventiveHitches.com. You'll be glad you did.
What are you working on? Brought to you by Miller Electric, the leading manufacturer of arc welding and cutting equipment for your business or home shop.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Alvin Bowman from Ozark, Arkansas. Now, I'm not going to tell you what he's working on. I'm going to let you tell me. There you go. Take a look at it. Now, did you say Ford, Chevy, Dodge, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, any of those things? Well, those are all wrong because he made this car totally from scratch. Now, he said him and his buddy Charlie made this thing in about 30 days. Now, take another look at this. He said the frame is 2x4 square tubing, the body's 18-gauge steel, and he's got a 65 Ford front end, a 95 T-Bird rear end, 350 Chevy engine and tranny. I mean, totally hand fabricated. Then, of course, he did the paint and interior himself. Now, he said this thing is a blast to drive, gets a ton of looks, and that's probably from people trying to figure out just exactly what this car is. Now, Alvin says that he built this sort of car because he didn't want to restore something else that was already out there. He wanted something totally unique, something totally his. And I'll tell you what, man, he's got it. Look at the shape of that grill. Look at the shape of the cowl area there. So, Alvin, awesome job, man. To help you out on your next project, we got one of these Miller welding jackets to keep those cuts and scrapes down to a minimum that you got on this car. He said he also has about 5,000 bucks in it. Now, man, I tell you what, that shows you can do these things on a budget. Now, the rest of you guys, if you want to get your project featured here on the show, send some stuff in to StaceyDavid.com and we'll do our best to get it on the air. All right, that's it for the show. That means it is time for you to get out there and start working on something.